I am willing to suck dick if it means firing Roger Craig Smith. This is the meta era. Every game here is cut from the same cloth and are all complete and utter dogshit in their own unique ways. All of these titles, or at least the design philosophies first introduced in them, were incredibly damaging to the Sonic brand, and their effects still echo throughout the series even to this day. People on hardcore copium like to believe that the meta era is long since behind us. Takashi Iizuka, often referred to as Daddy Zuck by Premulus Remulus, has even gone on to express regret for what happened to Sonic in the 2010s. 10 years ago, I moved from Tokyo to Burbank. At that time, the Sonic brand was not in a very positive space. A lot of people were bashing on the brand. They weren't really happy with the things coming out. Thanks to being propped up by the success of Sonic Movie 1, you'd think that Sonic had finally moved on into a multimedia era. I've even parroted this idea myself, but as time has gone on, I've started to see cracks emerge in even supposedly post-meta era games like Frontiers and Shadow Generations. Despite what Daddy Zuck has said, 10 years ago, I don't think any of us could have believed this could become the normal reality. Thinking of it now, and us being successful, it's like 180 degrees. We were fighting to survive. It's totally different now. The meta era is not long since behind us. In fact, I think it's not even close to being over. The meta era games are not only defined by the time span in which they released, but rather a set of shared characteristics that made them also deplorable. You can spot a meta era title by it having the following attributes in any combination: horrible voice acting and characterization, a lack of a sufficient budget or feeling low budget, clinging too much onto the past, and ignoring Sonic's extended cast of characters. So let's take a quick look and see how these traits still apply to the games released in the 2020s. The voice acting in both Frontiers and Shadow 2024 are still atrocious. Roger Craig Smith and Kirk Thornton are generational miscasts and are what I'd call remnants of the 2010s. But despite neither of them ever having a single good performance as Sonic or Shadow, I actually think the characterization of these characters has really leveled up since Colors. Sonic actually acts like himself in Frontiers, not constantly quipping like he did in Forces. Throughout the title, it becomes overwhelmingly clear how he'd do anything to save his captured friends, and I like how seriously Sonic treats the situation at hand. I also really enjoyed his revived dynamic with Knuckles, another character that Frontiers uplifted and brought back into the spotlight. Shadow in Shadow 2024 also acts a lot more like the depiction of him in SA2, not composing himself like the flanderized version of him seen in Shadow 05 that lacked the emotional range that he once had previously. So while the voice acting is basically a lost cause at this point, characterization has come a long way. To move on, while Frontiers infamously suffered from a lack of budget, with insurmountable amounts of pop-in and Chaos Island and The End alike feeling overtly unfinished, I'm willing to give it a pass because of its overall scope and it being Sonic's first open zone title. In Shadow 2024, despite being short in length, not having remotely enough cutscenes, still has a budget that resonates through its presentation and animation quality. In terms of clinging too much onto the past, Frontiers infamously included Green Hill Zone, which had already been in Generations, Mania, and Forces, and even went as far as to reuse level design from past entries such as SA2 and Unleashed. Shadow 2024, while overall being a huge step in the right direction, still undergoes the same failings, double dipping into old level motifs and not really pushing Shadow's story forward. And finally, both these games thankfully fall out of the usual meta era trope of ignoring Sonic's extended cast, giving major roles to previously neglected characters like Knuckles and Amy. Shadow 2024 as well props up Maria and Gerald Robotnik's place in Shadow's story, as well as bringing back Black Doom and even Mephiles. Overall, the characterization has greatly improved, the budget's increased, and Sonic's extended cast has finally been made to become important again. So with only a few things left to be changed, why do I feel like Sonic is still stuck in the 2010s? Earlier, you may have noticed that there was something blocked off while discussing the failings of the meta era. This is something that I think is severely under-discussed, and is something that severely impacted how enjoyable the games have been since Unleashed. And that is the idea that Sonic games have just become too fucking easy. I've scoured literally hundreds of interviews and articles trying to figure out why they still make the games like this, and I think I finally have an answer. But before I can tell you, we have to go back to the height of the meta era, to a time where Colors and Generations had just come out, and public perception of the brand had finally shifted in a positive direction. Let's go back to 2013, to right before Sonic Lost World was about to release. And let's first answer the question, why did Sega ditch the boost formula with Lost World? If you were in the fandom at the time, the release of Lost World was truly something to behold. The decision for Sega to shift away from the boost formula during a time that had become so popular was one of their most out-of-touch, baffling decisions in recent memory. If general audiences and game journalists alike had finally come around on Sonic and become advocates for the franchise, then who the fuck was Sega trying to appeal to with Lost World? Even in previous videos of mine, I presented this idea that Lost World, along with Colors, were made to appeal to Nintendo fans. This is undeniably true, and Iizuka has gone on record about this multiple times. But that doesn't tell the whole story. This is Aaron Weber. Unfortunately no longer working at Sega, Aaron has a long history with the Sonic brand fan, and during the promotional period for Lost World, acted as the associate brand manager for Sonic. And during almost all of his PR for Lost World, Weber presented an idea that really caught my attention. The idea that Sonic had become too hard to control.
You guys have sort of blended 2D and 3D, like you said. What was the motivation for that design?
The motivation was Sonic's control. And I think one of the biggest complaints from fans is like, I love going fast, but then I hate that I don't have any control. And I'm going so fast, I fly off the edge or I hit something and I just stop.
This idea presented by Aaron isn't revolutionary. It actually came up a lot during the research I did on colors. A while back, Flash Dash did a wonderful job tackling the subject, in which he discussed how fundamentally difficult Sonic games are and how often they poorly convey their ideas to the player. This clip from Ben Schwartz, someone thousands of times more talented than Roger Craig Smith, exemplifies this idea perfectly. To most gamers, SA2 isn't all that difficult once you get the hang of it, but for someone like Ben Schwartz, someone I'm gonna assume only plays modern games or doesn't have that much time for gaming in general, found it so difficult that he felt it would be best for him to watch a playthrough rather than play it for himself.
As we were doing this game, I got the game to play on Xbox, and I found the controls to be so difficult that I watched a playthrough.
Accounts like these are the reason that Sonic Team has become so fixated on making Sonic as accessible as possible since 2010, and this is undeniably the reason they campaigned this fact so hard during PR for Lost World.
So Sonic, he's known for his speed, but this time around, he's also got precision.
Speaking of which, did you know that Takashi Iizuka actually revealed that he was willing to make the graphics of Sonic worse in order to make Lost World more accessible?
Because of the HD graphic itself, we felt that the important the items and the rings were covered up with the too much detailed background features. So actually in this Lost World, we wanted to have more playable game. So actually we went back to the Mega Drive Sonic kind of taste and colors. So which, as you can see in the ROM, you can see much more rings and items much more easier than the generations.
This explanation of Weber and Iizuka implying that they ditched the boost formula for the sake of accessibility didn't suffice for me though. Like, I was 13 around when Lost World was coming out, and I didn't personally believe that game journalists were complaining that colors and generations were too difficult. The same dogshit Sonic games that you can S-rank with your eyes closed. So I wasn't satisfied and kept looking for an answer. And little did I know that I wouldn't be getting an answer from Iizuka, but I'd be getting an answer because of big red button games. In focus tests, we heard all the time, people were sick of speed. Sonic was too fast. They wanted to slow down. Speed was shelved because we were under the impression that people didn't want it. Speed is always a Sonic thing. We didn't focus on that. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is our answer. This is the reason why Sega pivoted from the boost formula. Despite how seemingly successful Colors and Generations were with general audiences and game journalists, it seems as though Sega wasn't so satisfied internally, and appealing to playtesters, whom I now know are the lowest common denominator, was their sole aim with Lost World. And one of the reasons that I believe that the meta era is still not over is the fact that they're still designing their games with this philosophy, and by extension, refusing to make difficult Sonic games. I'm sure you all remember this infamous quote from Shun Nakamura from before Forces came out.
Many games feature complex and intricate gameplay. However, with Sonic, it's more sloppy, but easy. Often with games, there are many moments where one must take time to aim before shooting, but in this game, you simply press and hold the button to attack. So you can really enjoy ultimately just dashing like a maniac through the stages.
This is in stark contrast from Sonic games from before the meta era, such as Unleashed, that actually required focus and precision from the player. It wasn't literally boost to win, like how you could beat Terminal Velocity Act 2 by mashing A, or how you don't have to press a single button throughout this sequence in Arsenal Pyramid. And the fucked up part is, I know Sonic Team is still capable of developing difficult Sonic stages, and there's even evidence that they really want to. See this beta layout for Mortar Canyon. There's just so much more going on here than in Mortar Canyon Retail. Notice the spikes lining these platforms that are completely missing from the final game. And this quick-step section involving these lasers is also nowhere to be found. Everyone in the comments is pretty understandably lambasting and just going off on about how Sonic Team changed its act to appeal to IGN, but at this point in development, how would anything game journalists have to say even be relevant? They don't even have access to the game. The likely reason that this level was changed and overall made worse was most likely not because of game journalists, but because of playtesters not being able to complete the level often enough or fast enough for Sonic Team's quality and assurance. And it seems like this design philosophy has followed us well into the 2020s. What was the breakthrough in such a trial and error process? We found the light through repeated playtesting. In the past, Sonic games were usually playtested twice, but for this game, we playtested in North America once every 3 or 4 months. We would have children play the game and listen to their feedback. It stands to reason that with how much of a success that Frontiers has been, it seems like Sega is going to double down on appealing to playtesters. When we did the playtest with the first version, the kids eviscerated it. They said things like, "This is not Sonic, and the world is too empty and boring until you reach the destination." They said whatever was on their mind, and that's when the trial and error process began. So this fact doesn't really bode well for those that like their Sonic games to be difficult. But before I move on, I want to say that accessibility is not inherently a bad thing. Some of the best video games out there, Smash Bros. Melee, Mario Kart Wii, are exactly that. Easy to pick up and hard to master. But the problem with accessibility is when it becomes a detriment to the game design to the point where the developer's original visions are inhibited. What do you think Yoshihisa Hashimoto, the inventor of the boost formula, who sought out to make Sonic go as fast as possible, would think about how much it's been neutered and simplified over the years? What do you think Yoshihisa Hashimoto, the director of the Hedgehog engine, who fought tooth and nail to make Sonic Unleashed look as good as a Pixar film, would think about Takashi Iizuka ditching global illumination for the sake of accessibility? From the quotes made about playtesting from Morio Kishimoto and the gameplay of Shadow 2024, which features a kind of nerfed boost formula, the slowest the series has ever seen, it looks like difficult Sonic games will remain a thing of the past. Has Sonic finally moved on from the meta era? Yes and no. I can't help agree with the shit that Iizuka said earlier. Things are so much better than they were in the 2010s. When I go to Target, I see Sonic merchandise lining the shelves. When I go to the mall, I see Sonic plushies taking up so much space on the kiosks. There was a time in the 2010s where it just felt like everyone had forgotten about Sonic, but the energy right now is just so different. I will never accept Roger as Sonic, and despite his dogshit voice acting, I still see glimpses of the real Sonic every day. I hear him when I watch Sonic Prime. I can feel him when I watch the films. Sonic Team has made so much progress, but there's still just a couple of kinks that need to be ironed out. They need to make the games more difficult again. They need to kill classic Sonic and make more 2D modern Sonic games. And they need to fire Roger Craig Smith. Maybe then I'll admit that the meta era is over. Maybe then I'll admit that Sonic has finally come home.